Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make a front open gown. So for the gown, I'm going to use a see-through printed blue cloth, and for the lining underneath, I'm using a solid color. And so I'm separating the cloth for the front and the back pieces as their drafting is different. So I'm starting with the front piece first and folding that in half. So now you're going to start drafting from the open side of the cloth. So I'm marking about 2 inches. And this part of the cloth I'm going to fold over. So here I'm folding it over and then ironing it so that it doesn't shift around. And then you want to also pin this. Okay, and so here is the 2 inches of folded cloth that I've pinned. Okay, so now I'm just going to do normal shirt drafting. So from shoulder to shoulder, I'm measuring mine at 7.5 inches. So this is only half of my shoulder measurement. So we're only taking half measurements because remember we folded this piece, front piece in half. So now I'll take down 1 inch for the shoulder slope. So this is the shoulder slope marking, and now I'm going to mark the neck width at 2.5 because this is for a collared neck, so we don't want that to be really wide. And now I'm just joining the 2 points, the shoulder slope to the neck width markings. So now from the shoulder slope marking, I'm marking down the armhole measurement, which is 7.5 inches. So next I'm going to be marking down the bust measurement at 9.5 inches. So that's the bust measurement. And now I'm just connecting the shoulder slope marking to the armhole marking. So now you want to take half of this line and mark that down. That's the midpoint of the line joining the armhole to the shoulder point. And now you want to mark 1 inch above this midpoint. Next, we're going to connect the bust marking to that midpoint, the 1 inch marking above the midpoint using a circular line. And then you want to join the midpoint to the shoulder slope marking. And that's the drafting of our front armhole. Now we're going to move on to the neck drafting. So you want to mark down 3 inches for the depth of the neckline. And then you want to mark down 2.5 inches for the width of the front neckline. And then just join them up. And then we just draw a curve. So again, the neck depth is 3 inches. The width is 2.5 inches. And from the corner, we're up 3.25 inches. Okay, so now from the bust marking, we go down 7 inches for the waist measurement, and we mark that down. So that's 7 inches. And at this point, we'll mark down 1/4 of the waist measurement. So mine goes to 8.5 inches. And after the waist measurement, again, we go down 7 inches for the hip measurement. At this point, we'll mark down 1/4 of the hip measurement, and then we join the waist point to the hip point. So now you want to mark down the length of your shirt. And that just depends on how long you want your shirt to be. And once you mark that the length down, we can mark the width of our shirt. I'm taking mine to be an inch wider than the hip measurement, but you can take it a bit wider if you would like to. And now you just join that width marking to the hip point measurement. And so now we've completed the drafting of the front of our shirt. So if you want your gown to have slits at the sides, you want to add an additional inch from the hip measurement all the way to the bottom of your gown. And then just mark that down and connect the bottom of the gown to that hip measurement. And now I'm just going to add seam allowance all around the outline that we've just created. So I'm adding a 1-inch seam allowance. And then just cut around the seam allowance markings all around the shirt. And I'm unpinning the 2 inches that we've folded over at the beginning for the front piece and separate the 2 pieces. And so here are the 2 panels for the front of the gown. I'm just laying them here side by side. Okay, so now you take the back piece and fold it according to the width of your shirt, and you place one of the front panels on top of it, and you just cut along this front panel, but keep in mind that the drafting for the armhole and the neck are going to be different for the back piece. So I've left a link in the description box below for those of you who want to know how we cut along for those 2 areas of the back piece. So now I'm just placing the front panels and lining them up with the back side. And these are the 2-inch folds that we had for each of the panels. Okay, so now I've got 2 40 inches long and 1.5 inch wide piece of interface to put in these 2-inch folds. So because our cloth is see-through, we'll first have to sew the interface in a solid blue color before putting it in these 2-inch folds. Also make sure that this blue cloth is an inch wider and an inch longer than the interface. So just like I'm showing you in the video, that's how you would place it inside the 2-inch folds. I've already done one of the sides. So this is the side I've already done. Okay, let's see this more clearly. So you want to take the stripe and put it on the wrong side of the panel, and then you want to run a stitch on both edges, and then you want to fold it over, and that's it. So I've attached the interface and I've also stitched the sides of the gown. And I'm just going to fold the gown in half. The open side is facing me. And I'm cutting off the corner about an inch. So right there, just like a little bit of a curve. It must be cut off because without it, the corners of the gown will be drooping down. So you want to make sure that you cut that corner off as I've shown you in the video. Okay, so now we're going to hem the bottom of the dress. As you can see, it's much easier to fold the bottom of the dress because the interface doesn't extend all the way to the bottom. So you want to fold the bottom twice and run a stitch. This is just basic hemming. So if the interface extended all the way to the bottom, it would be really difficult to fold the cloth for the hem. Okay, so before taking the neck measurements for the collar, first run a stitch around the neckline just to keep the folded edge under control. Okay, so after attaching the interface to the front panels and running a stitch on the neckline, we're ready to start making our collar. So first you want to take the neck measurement, start from one edge and go all the way to the other edge, just like I'm showing you in the video. So for me that makes 16 inches. And now you just want to mark half of that on a folded piece of interface, so at 8 inches. And now you want to mark 1.5 inch for the width of the collar all the way from one end to the other, just so we can get a straight line. Now we're just going to join all of these marks to get that straight line. So this is basically our reference line, and we're going to mark 2.5 inches from the folded side right on top of this reference line, and we're going to mark 2.5 inches below this reference line. Now you want to mark a 1/2 inch above this reference line and a 1/2 inch below this reference line. And now we're just going to join these 2 points and discard that reference line. Now you want to join the bottom mark that we just made to the earlier 2.5 inch mark. And then you want to do the same thing with the top mark that we just made. So now I'm just darkening the outline of the collar so that you can see it better. And just discard that bottom line. Okay, so now we have our new 1.5 inch wide collar drafting done on the interface. So now you can curve the top corner of the collar if you would like, and we're just gonna cut off the drafting we just did on the interface. Now take about 4 inches wide and 17 inches long of the plain blue cloth and half of that width for the pattern blue cloth. After attaching that, flip the cloth on the wrong side and attach the interface. So this side will be attached to the neckline. So now I'm just taking it to the machine to run a stitch. So now you can see I've done the stitching. The next step would be to fold this cloth in half. And you want to fold one of the bottom edges towards the interface and run a stitch on it. So this is the bottom edge that I'm going to fold over and run a stitch. And then I'm also going to run a stitch all around the interface as I'm tracing with my finger. So now I'm sewing one of the edges to the interface, just like I mentioned earlier. And my next step would be to run a stitch all around the interface. So now I'm folding it in half and running a stitch all around the interface. So now watch carefully what I'm doing. So first you want to back stitch. And now go around the interface slowly and carefully and make sure to not that you don't stitch on top of the interface. So we're just going carefully around the interface. So don't stitch on top of the interface. And then once again, you want to back stitch when you're at the end. Now after this, we just want to leave 1/2 inch all around the stitch and cut off the extra fabric. So now this is the 1/2 inch that we're leaving around the stitch we made around the interface. So after this, you just want to run an iron on it. And now we're just going to take these raw edges of the collar and attach it to the neckline. So remember to backstitch at the beginning and end of the seam. So I'm first backstitching. Then you want to stitch carefully and make sure to move the rest of the fabric out of the way. So we're just attaching it to the neckline only. Then turn the other edge of the collar and set it nicely. So now we're going to run a stitch on this side of the collar. First backstitch. And now after we're done running that stitch, you want to run a stitch all around the collar. So it doesn't matter where you start, you just go all around the collar. So this is essentially the last step in making the gown. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe.